Me, 23M, found a picture of my mom in an elderly person's home. I work at a large facility that cares for seniors who can no longer take care of themselves. Recently, I was reassigned to a new area where I met a resident named John, a man with a great sense of humor despite the challenges he faced. One evening, while helping him settle in for the night, I noticed a small pinboard filled with photos of people he cherished. Most of them were familiar faces, but one photo caught me completely off guard. It was a picture of my mother. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes. The woman in the photo looked like my mother, albeit a bit younger, holding hands with John. I had moved to a northern state 7 months ago, and my entire family was back on the East Coast. As far as I knew, no one in my family had ever visited this state. Curious and slightly anxious, I asked John if he had ever traveled outside of the state. He assured me he had never left, as he had always struggled financially. After he fell asleep, I quickly turned the picture over and found my mother's name along with John's name and a date. This indicated that my mother had been with him when I was just 8 years old. At that time, she was married to my father, and they were approaching a milestone anniversary. My heart raced as I realized I might have stumbled upon evidence of an affair. I was torn. Should I confront my father? Should I ask John about the picture? The implications were heavy, and I felt overwhelmed. I decided to seek advice online, and many suggested I approach John casually about the picture without revealing my connection to it. A few days later, I was assigned to care for John again. As I helped him prepare for bed, I mentioned how lovely his pinboard was, and he smiled, inviting me to look at it with him. As he went through each photo, I felt a knot tightening in my stomach. When we reached the picture of my mother, he paused, sighed deeply, and looked at me with a glimmer of sadness in his eyes. He asked, "Ever lose someone you thought you could live together with?" His voice cracked, and I could see the emotion welling up inside him. I asked how he knew my mother, and he began to recount their story. They had met years ago during a business conference where she was attending for work, and he was a contractor. Sparks had flown, and it turned out my mother had indeed cheated on my father during that brief encounter. As John spoke, I felt my heart shatter. He didn't seem to realize the weight of what he was saying, and I struggled to keep my composure. After he finished, I helped him to bed with a forced smile, but once I was alone, I broke down in tears. I hadn't cried like that in years. The revelation was devastating, and I was left grappling with the reality of my mother's choices and the impact they could have on my family. I recently stumbled upon a shocking discovery that turned my world upside down. While working at an elderly assistance home, I found a picture of my mother among the belongings of a resident. This resident, an older gentleman, was someone I had been taking care of for a while, but I had no idea of the connection between him and my mom. As I examined the photo, my heart sank. It became painfully clear that my mother had an affair with this man years ago. My parents have always been known in our community for their seemingly perfect marriage, and the thought of this revelation was devastating. I couldn't help but think about how this would affect my father if he ever found out. The idea of shattering his trust and happiness was unbearable. That night, I found myself drowning in a sea of emotions. I felt heartbroken and overwhelmed, and I turned to alcohol in an attempt to cope. I wrestled with the dilemma of whether I should confront my mother about this secret or keep it to myself to protect my family's reputation. I knew that clearing my conscience could come at a great cost, potentially destroying my parents' marriage in the process. As I reflected on the situation, I realized that I needed to find a way to navigate this delicate matter without causing irreparable harm. It was a heavy burden to carry, knowing that I held a secret that could change everything. I had to decide whether to speak up or remain silent, all while grappling with the emotional fallout of this shocking revelation.
Today, I messed up by giving dating advice to a predator. I had a coworker, whom I'll refer to as Cody, and we worked together for just over a year in an office setting. During that time, we had plenty of downtime, which led to a lot of conversations. Most of our chats revolved around everyday topics, but soon enough, Cody started asking me for advice about women and dating. He would seek my tips on building confidence, how to engage women in conversation, and why he struggled to get second dates. I shared the usual advice: approach situations with confidence, treat women as individuals rather than just potential partners, and focus on self-improvement. Over the year, I noticed that he seemed to take my advice to heart. He started going to therapy, eating healthier, and hitting the gym. I even saw him have better dates with women he met on dating apps. However, things took a turn when he decided to take a trip across the country to visit what he called the one that got away. When he returned, I asked how it went. He told me that she had blocked him after he had waited outside her workplace, tracking her on Snapchat maps. It was alarming to hear that he had shown up at her house, only to be confronted by a shirtless man who told him to leave. I felt compelled to intervene, warning him that he was dangerously close to crossing the line into harassment and stalking. Despite my concerns, he continued to pursue her for a few more months, even switching phones to text her. Eventually, he claimed to be matching with more women on dating apps in a town an hour away, driving there after work, and returning in the morning. I was relieved to see him happy and confident, thinking he had finally moved on. Things took a shocking turn when Cody left our section of the workplace for another area. One morning, we were all called into a meeting where management informed us that Cody was no longer allowed access to our section. They advised us to report any suspicious activity, but wouldn't provide further details. Naturally, my curiosity got the better of me, and another coworker and I decided to look up Cody's name online. What we found was chilling. An article detailed a police sting operation that had involved Cody and several others. Law enforcement had posed as underage girls, and Cody had sent inappropriate pictures, intending to meet someone he believed to be a minor. The very town he had been visiting frequently was the same one where the sting took place. Cody was subsequently removed from our workplace and arrested, facing serious charges. I often find myself grappling with the weight of the situation. I know I shouldn't blame myself. He made his own choices and is ultimately responsible for his actions. I can't shake the feeling that my advice may have inadvertently given him the confidence to pursue these dangerous behaviors. It's a heavy burden to carry, and I often feel sick to my stomach thinking about it.
Am I the bad guy for turning my back on my siblings because they were pressuring me to support our mother and saying I never did anything too? I'm a 25-year-old man with 3 younger siblings, aged 21, 20, and 18. We all have different fathers, and while I know who mine is, he has his own family, and there's no chance of a relationship there. Growing up, we were raised by our mother, who was anything but nurturing. She had a quick temper and often took her frustrations out on us. When my youngest sibling was on the way, my mother got involved with a man who was not only an alcoholic, but also had a troubling lifestyle. He would act inappropriately in front of us and threatened me if I ever annoyed him. As their relationship progressed, my mother began drinking heavily, becoming even more abusive and neglectful. This left me in a position where I had to care for my siblings. I often scavenged for food, sometimes even taking it from trash cans, and I would find used clothes for them to wear. I was always honest with them about where our food came from and warned them to be cautious of our mother and her boyfriends. Despite the chaos, I did my best to shield my siblings from the worst of it. I wanted them to understand that our mother was not someone to be trusted. I even managed to get them therapy through a charity, trying to help them process the trauma we endured together. Recently, my siblings decided to reconnect with our mother, who claimed to be sober and wanted to rebuild our relationship. She painted a picture of being homeless and in need of help, and my siblings wanted me to support them in reaching out to her. When I refused, they began to pressure me, insisting that if I truly loved them, I would agree to meet her. Their words cut deep. They accused me of never helping anyone and claimed I had let our mother's alcoholism tear our family apart. They said I owed them more than that, and in that moment, I felt utterly betrayed. I reminded them of everything I had done to keep us safe, but it seemed to mean nothing to them because I hadn't helped our mother. The argument echoed our mother's manipulative tactics, and I was filled with anger and hurt. They even suggested that I wished our mother dead, which was a painful accusation. After everything I had sacrificed for them, it felt like a knife to the heart. I saw my mother's influence in their words and actions, and it was too much to bear. In a moment of frustration, I told them to leave my life if they wanted to continue down that path. I muted them on my phone, feeling that I had done all I could. Now, they're calling me selfish and saying I'm the bad guy for walking away. I can't help but wonder if I truly am the one in the wrong for wanting to protect myself from the cycle of pain.